welcome to OverBoost 42. OverBoost is a podcast interview series featuring discussions with speedrunners about their history in speedrunning and gaming and the runs they're passionate about. I am your host, PMC Trilogy, and with me today is Jaxler. Jaxler, thank you so much for joining me.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Now, I always like to start these off with some current events. And one of those current events that happened recently, and I haven't talked about it before at all on the podcast, is the 12-hour challenge, which has been going on for a number of years. Now. I think it's typically biannual, something that is sort of loosely organized, I think, by Golden. And I know you did a game for it, but I wanted to ask, was this the first time you had done this, or had you done 12-hour challenges before?
No, actually. I've actually done this several times before. I think maybe 35 to 40% of the games that I've run or I've actively run were 12-hour challenge games for me at some point. So Neopets, which we'll talk about at some point, that was a 12-hour challenge run. Scooby Night of 100 Frights, which I ran at GDQ, that was actually a 12-hour several years ago. Dog's Life, which I don't really run anymore, but that's a video game that exists.
Yeah, I mean, so if people aren't familiar with it, just to make sure anyone listening or watching, the idea of the 12-hour challenge is that you can take 12 hours, usually over a weekend. It's not strictly enforced. There's no 12-hour challenge police.
Right.
But the idea is that as either a new speedrunner or a veteran speedrunner, you can pick up a new game and try and complete a run within 12 hours. Again, it's sort of a loose challenge, but the idea is that you can sit down and do that. I know for you, this past time, you did a game called Pumpkin Jack, which I had not heard of before seeing you do runs. Can you just tell us real quick what Pumpkin Jack is and why you were running it?
Yeah, so the best way I would describe Pumpkin Jack, if you've heard of the game Medieval before on the OG PlayStation, it's like Medieval and A Hat in Time had a baby. That's the best way I can put it. From aesthetics standpoint, it's a 3D action platformer, based a little bit around combat, and sort of the spooky Halloween aesthetic, kind of like Medieval does. I was put onto it by a friend of mine named Britt, who I know from the SpongeBob community. I've known him for about 5 years, and he's also a Medieval fan. And he messaged me one day and he's like, "Dude, you would really like this game." And I looked at, cause he started running it almost at release. I released about a year ago. About a year ago. And I watched him do a run of it, and I'm like, yeah, this is kind of my thing, isn't it? And so I'm like, all right, I'll give it a try. I played it casually. I really liked it. And then I was like, okay, I'll 12-hour challenge this. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. And it's really, really cool as a speed run so far. It's very momentum based. So there's a lot of momentum boost stuff that you can mess with. So I'm not great at it, but that's the whole point of the 12-hour, right? Is you learn, and part of the restriction of the 12-hour is you just have to make compromises to get it done within the 12 hour. Obviously, no one, like you said, no one polices you about it, but you have to you have to make some compromises with I won't invest so much time into learning this one trick, so I can complete the challenge, and it kind of guides people into not hyper focusing, I guess. And so, I'm getting there, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, I think it's actually, you bring up a really good point, which is that I think it's already a well-known thing that when someone's new to speedrunning, to say that hey, don't stress out about going for a world record time. I feel like that's already pretty commonly said. And I feel like this is sort of a corollary of that, which is, not only don't stress about getting a top time, but maybe, find the best way to finish a run for you. And, whatever that might be. And I know, I feel like more and more I'm seeing, communities being like, oh yeah, these are top tier strats and these are more beginner friendly strats or skips or routes or things like that. And 12-hour challenge being a way to encourage that, I think it's probably one of the ideal outcomes of something like 12-hour challenge.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing too is if you think about it from a learning perspective, it's good too, because if you try to if you're forcing yourself to learn all the stuff at once, it doesn't always stick, but when you study for a test in school, you don't study all at once. You study in chunks, ideally, so that you don't like it sticks better in your head, right? So it's kind of like the same thing. That's why I like doing it, because I'm obsessive. I will spend like 12 hours, like more than 12 hours straight learning a game because I have a problem. But yeah.
Do you have an idea of how many 12-hour challenges you've done at this point? Because I really wasn't sure what to expect from asking that question before.
Yeah, let me double check. I can tell from, because sometimes I forget all the games I've learned.
Sure.
Because it's been a bit. There have been a couple of times where I was gonna 12-hour challenge a game, but I didn't want to wait for the weekend that it happened, so I just learned it early. So in terms of like the actual games I've 12-hour challenge, let's see, one.
Yeah, because you listed off some. There was Scooby-Doo, Dog's Life.
This was okay.
Neopets.
So Pumpkin Jack would have been my fifth.
Okay.
Yeah. So
interesting, cool, and I think it's really interesting too. Because I've never really talked to someone about this particular topic on the podcast, I wasn't sure to what extent these sorts of things become part of one's speedrun repertoire. Because I feel like sometimes I talk to people about it, and it's like, oh yeah, that was a PB I did during a 12-hour challenge once. You know, it was something they tried and didn't come back to, which is totally fair. So it's just interesting to see that it's become things, an element of what you've done. Do you feel like Pumpkin Jack is a game that you're going to continue with and, I don't know, submit to marathons and stuff like that? I
have gotten addicted to this game. It's just like it's like one of those like iceberg memes, where it's like once you start learning like some of the more ridiculous momentum boost stuff, it's just like, oh, I have been sitting here and it's now 4 a.m. Oops.
Yeah, you're at the bottom of the iceberg now.
Yeah. But it's interesting. It's also like one of those games I kind of want to share with people because and maybe we can talk about this a bit later if it's more appropriate. But the devs actually built an in-game timer for the game, like directly into the game, and so you can run ILs or you can run full game with the in-game timer, and it works on all platforms. So you can be a PC runner or an Xbox runner or a PlayStation runner, and you can compete with everyone else and not have to worry about any like load time shenanigans or anything like that. Like the devs did us a solid like that. So I always like sharing games with people like that because I know, someone who runs a lot of games, it can like people might be like, hey, you've run a lot of games before. What would you suggest I run? And so like I like being able to have games like that where it's like I can suggest a game to someone that it doesn't matter what platform they have it for, right? Because I think that's important for accessibility, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I do agree with that. And also I think too, what's interesting here is that as a part of preparation for these interviews, I watch a bunch of runs that you kind of pointed out to me. And a lot of the runs that you had pointed out to me are licensed games from like 6th generation era, 7th generation era. And typically, those are situations where the developers are already kind of obscured by the license, right? Because the publisher probably just has a license deal. And, in a lot of cases, you might not be able to find or be able to talk to the people that worked on those games. Whereas now, in this era of indie gaming and the internet and like the connectivity through social media, you can really interact with people. Right. It's really, you can, and you just said that, right? Like, actually, do you know if, because you mentioned that the devs put an in-game timer, was that the way you phrased that, was that in response to like speed running, or was that just sort of like there's a great tool that thankfully the devs provided?
It's really a great tool, but just like kind of having run a bunch of different games, I know, like I've learned firsthand how frustrating it can be when, especially, I'll give one example of a game I've run, the SpongeBob movie game. I grew up with that game on the GameCube version. And the GameCube, at least 5 years ago, the GameCube version was by far not the optimal version to run. So even though I started learning to run on that, it was very frustrating to me because there were these people playing on Xbox that I couldn't compete with because they just had better loading times, right? And so something I try to promote, even with my own speed games, is just trying to kind of dispel that notion because it was frustrating to me at first. but like, and I think as like things have, as our community, I'm talking general speedrunning community, like as our communities like changed over time, I think that notion that I have to run on the fastest version is kind of dying a little. Like I think people are becoming a lot more okay with just being a part of the community in that sense. But if I see something like that in a game where it's just like anyone can try it, that's what I really look for. And in some of my own speed games too, I'll be like hey, if you're playing on Wii, you don't have to switch over. It's only, like I care a little bit more about like doing research on those kinds of numbers. So like, because the worst thing I'd want to have happen is like somebody makes an investment that doesn't end up being satisfactory to them, right? And so that's kind of like that kind of console accessibility is something that kind of matters to me a little bit. If that makes any sense. I don't know. I kind of
absolutely. I mean, I'll tell you one of the things too is that because some of the games that you play are indeed 6th generation games or your medievals, 5th gen. This is definitely going to be a topic that we will be revisiting soon. But in order to properly arrive at that topic, I think it's time that we go back in time. Where does gaming start for you? Who does it come from? How did you get first introduced?
So I was pretty young. I would have been like 4 or 5. It's fuzzy because I was an idiot child. But basically, we had I think we had our first console was like the PlayStation 1. But my brother and I, when we were that young, we were kind of like too scared to like play it because we were small people. So we would watch my dad play on the PlayStation, and the 2 games I remember from then were Scooby-Doo Cyber Chase and Frogger 2 on the PS1. Those were the ones, and I don't know if like the meme of like like the younger brother playing with the unplugged controller. Being the second player. It was kind of like a situation for like that for us when we were younger. Like we didn't really understand what we were doing. My mom thought it was cute, but as far as like us sort of engaging with it, the first like where it was always me and my brother. We shared most of our games growing up, and the one I remember the most at the very start was Pokemon Sapphire. Basically, the way because my mom was like the person like on Christmas, like she figured out the game stuff, but like I think a way a lot of parents operated was they either they obviously like talk to like other parents, but like if there was like a show or like something like that we watched, they were like, oh, here's a game with that show's character, I'm sure my kids will love this, right? Because if you think about it from a parent's perspective who doesn't like, my parents weren't gamers, right? So they didn't really know, they didn't really have a gauge on what kind of stuff they would like. So they knew Pokemon was good because my cousins liked Pokemon. So they knew about Pokemon, and they knew about all these TV shows we watched, like Scooby-Doo and SpongeBob and, Ed, Edd and Ed and all these. And it just so happens that like that era of licensed games happened to be really outstanding. Big stroke of luck.
Yeah, for sure.
So growing up, we kind of grew up on like those 6th gen console SpongeBob games, like Battle for Bikini Bottom, SpongeBob Movie, Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights was one we had growing up. So we really kind of grew up on like those GameCube, PS2 era licensed games and the Pokemon stuff too. So from I get it, like after the childhood stuff, I guess.
Well, I do want to ask before you get to the next point in the timeline.
Sure.
You were sharing a lot of this stuff with a sibling.
Yeah.
Did this stuff survive your childhood? Do you have it? Does your sibling have it?
Yeah, it's funny. It depends on the game because my brother and I actually have a really great relationship. We grew up as each other's best friends, pretty much. And we were pretty isolated and pretty sheltered growing up. So a lot of our early gaming memories were together. Either one of us, usually with my brother, but sometimes me playing through a game and the other would watch, or we'd like co-op a Pokemon game or something like that. or we'd trade all the time, and like we would have the opposite versions of, you know, one would have ruby, one would have sapphire. And so it depended on like we still have a lot of our old games, but who has what is kind of dependent on who had the more sentimental attachment to it. So a lot of, for my brother, for example, his favorite memories from our childhood were us playing Pokemon XD and Pokemon Coliseum together on the GameCube. So those discs are his. I do not get to touch those. Those are his. But one game that we had growing up for me was Chibi Robo. And that was a game that my brother liked, but that was the one that I was really more attached to. So the English disc of Chibi Robo that I have is the one that I had from 2006 when the game came out, which is kind of interesting. So it really kind of depended. There was a good chunk of our library that we ended up goodwilling, for lack of a better term, because our PS2 that we had growing up died.
Yeah, that happens.
So it was just like, well, okay, you can't play these games anymore, so why are we bother keeping it around? And, you know, back then that actually kind of made sense to us. But, you know, now looking back, it's just like, why do we get rid of all these, you know? Although, I mean, with some of the stuff we played on PS2, it wasn't too hard to get a cheap copy.
Sure.
Thank you, eBay.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing with PS2, right? Is you know, some stuff is super easy to source, some stuff isn't. You know, it kind of depends on the game.
Yeah, and I think, and I'll get into this in a little bit, you know, further down the timeline. But like, because I got into speedrunning when I did, that's sort of when I started picking up all these old games I used to play, but ended up like donating to things like Goodwill. And as it turns out, for multi-platform releases, PS2 tends to be pretty slow. So I didn't even really, it wouldn't have even mattered if I had them.
Sure. How about this then? So now this might be a little further down the timeline, but it's a question I always like to ask. You're sharing all these consoles and games with your brother. You mentioned at some point, you know, you guys did kind of divvy things up because based on who really wanted this or that. When was the first time where you would have gotten you know, a major gaming item, a console or whatever, and that would have been just yours, you know? And then this could be you were, you know, maybe you moved out and, you know, you did something with your own money or something along those lines. Or, you know, do you have anything like that where you're like, this is no longer me and my bro, you know, me and my bro in the house.
This is my thing.
This is just my thing.
I would probably say, probably when I got a DS, was kind of my first experience. My brother had one too eventually. But I was the first of the two of us to acquire one. And that was like kind of my thing. I don't think so. Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, where it was like the the first DS Pokemon games.
Yes, yeah, the fourth gen.
They had not come out yet when I had like one of the original like those like iron ingot shaped DS, those like really massive ones.
They were big.
Yeah, and I remember that kind of being my first thing. I don't remember too many of the games I had for it before Pokemon, other than SpongeBob SquarePants Super Sponge, which is not an amazing video game, but it is one that exists, for lack of a better term. But it's interesting that you mentioned that, because it wasn't really until like later on in the timeline that my brother and I kind of split our interest in gaming a little bit, if that makes sense. Because when I was getting into like age, like late middle school, early high school is when I really started, probably more early middle school is when I really started getting into Minecraft. I think around that time would have been beta 1.6. So there would have been a fair bit. It's so weird that game's old now.
Yeah, you're telling me. Like,
side tangent. It makes me uncomfortable, and I'm only like 22, so it's just like.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, look, I have a nephew who came up to me the other day and I was like, you know, Uncle PMC, can you help me make magic potions in Minecraft? and I said, nephew, let me tell you, when I played Minecraft, there weren't potions, so no, I can't help you.
That's adorable.
So, you know, it was close. It was, you know, almost there. You actually segued into something, though, that's usually one of my other sort of pre-speedrunning gaming questions. which is our focus is going to be on these predominantly single player games.
Right.
But I do like to ask, what sort of multiplayer stuff have you been into? It sounds like, you probably did some couch stuff with your brother. You probably did some Minecraft. I mean, you can expand further on that, or is there other stuff you'd want to mention, League or something?
We were never really into shooters, like especially multiplayer shooters, because our parents followed the ESRB guidelines very strictly. Except for Dog's Life, which I don't know how we got our hands on that game because that's rated T. And, they waited until we were 13 for the T-rated games. But yeah, so in terms of like multiplayer stuff, Smash Bros. Brawl with my brother was a big one. But in terms of like the more public multiplayer stuff, Minecraft was really the big thing for me. Before I got into speedrunning, as I got further into the Minecraft sphere of influence, I started really getting interested with the more technical side of Minecraft. For those who aren't familiar, there's this system in the game called Redstone that lets you build all these really cool contraptions and stuff. And I got really, really into that. And eventually I started making YouTube videos about it because Twitch wasn't really a thing then, so streaming wasn't really a thing. And if you wanted to make, video content online, you did it through YouTube videos. So I started, doing like these Redstone builds and posting them online on YouTube. And that's kind of where I got into the idea of not looking at games as like a thing that you play, but like games as a system of like
a problem to be solved.
A problem to be solved, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what led me into speedrunning in the long run. In terms of what actually got me there, I was a big fan of like the early 2014, like those like glitch compilation videos, like even outside of like speedrunning stuff, it was like different YouTubers. I think A and Start is the one I remember the most, who would like compile all like these cool videos on like all these different useful and useless glitches that a game would have. And I remember me and a buddy would like try some of these out at home to see, because it was the internet. We didn't know if it was real or not, so we had to figure out for ourselves. And obviously we didn't know about version exclusive glitches back then, but
of course,
I remember messing around with like Majora's Mask, for example, trying to get the fourth day glitch and stuff like that. And it was through those videos that I learned about speedrunning, because a lot of times those videos sourced speedrunners for some of the information on their glitches. They would get help from glitch hunters and speedrunners and stuff like that for that content. And we're pretty tied in with that community. So that's kind of how I learned about speedrunning as a practice.
So at that point, you would have at some point made the transition to watching speedrun streams on Twitch around then?
Yeah, it wasn't actual like speedrun streamers. I would mostly just watch GDQs and like individual speedruns on YouTube, because I didn't really know what Twitch was back then. I was always kind of slow to those kind of things because we were kind of sheltered. I feel like we were kind of like on the tail end of like the generation that grew up with video games but also grew up outside. So like that sounds really bleak.
Well, I mean, there's a whole new generation that's growing up inside for other reasons, but
But, we didn't grow up with, cell phones or, iPhones and all that. We were kind of both. We were like the group of kids right before that generation. So, although to be fair, some other people my age did, but that's another
right. that might be a different dimension of analysis than generational.
But yeah, I guess from there, for getting into speedrunning was kind of through the Zelda scene. Because I was always really into the really busted glitches, because I just thought that was cool. And so I don't know how I got there, but I'm just like, okay, I eventually decided that I wanted to try speedrunning Ocarina of Time 3D, because I didn't really have access to the original version because my brother had the Wii. It's another one of those situations. So I messed around with the glitches on my 3DS, and I'm like, okay, I want to actually try speedrunning this. So there was like it's like 7 years old now. There's this, I learned this New Game Plus category, which is kind of unique to the 3D version of Ocarina of Time, where you can actually, through the use of a glitch, start with a non-sword item on your B button. So what you could do is you could glitch Feori's Wind, which is a warping spell, onto your B button and use that to warp to the credits. And that was called New Game Plus run. So that was like the first speed run I learned, and that would have been in like 2014 probably. And then very soon after is when I started learning Chibi Robo, which was, I kind of consider my first really main speed game, because I was like, oh, I'm playing on a 3DS. I can't really record this. Let me play something I can actually record.
I was about to ask. You probably don't have a recording of that speedrun because, okay. That's what I thought. But when you started doing Chibi Robo, that's still a console. So if you're capturing that, we're still talking about capture hardware. Were you recording those speedruns?
Yeah. So I messed around with Chibi Robo. So Chibi Robo didn't have like the same visibility that Ocarina of Time did in 2014. The Chibi Robo community at the very start of it all was centered around a pretty lengthy SDA forum, where people would discuss routes, and for a while the game was rather glitchless. So every like eon that someone found something, it would get posted there. And so I think I watched someone else's run and then tried it myself. Because to myself, I'm like, I don't know if I'm actually going to like this or not.
Sure.
So I'm going to try it once first. If I like it, I'll buy a capture card. And so I did it. I liked it. It was a lot of fun. I think my first run was a 3-hour and 10-minute run. It was really bad. And then I picked up an Elgato, which... Elgato.
Not a fan. What do you? So I'm guessing it probably would have been like one of those like. Actually, I guess one of those like HD60 ones, or no?
No, it was the regular.
It was the regular one, right? Because we're. Go ahead and say
it. Would have been 2014, and I still have that original one. Okay. Believe it or not, and I still use it for my GameCube for travel and stuff.
Yeah.
But. It took me weeks to get it figured out and set up, because it's very particular. It loves to just not do the thing. So yeah, that's kind of my journey from that into actually doing the speedrunning thing.
And then I guess another sort of milestone along the way is I feel like it's a jump, from not speedrunning to doing speedruns yourself.
Right.
It's also a jump to from there to on a semi-regular basis sharing that with other people via a platform like Twitch.
Yeah.
Was there a certain were you, because you mentioned a Chibi Robo, the focal point of discussion was an SDA thread, which makes sense. Games from that 6th generation era often have pretty lively SDA threads if you go searching for SDA forums. SDA forums are a good resource. If you want to speedrun an old game, do a search for your game name on SDA, and you might find stuff. I did when I was doing Shogo Mobile Armor Division. I had great success with that by searching the thread there. So for you, at what point did you say like, oh, let me start streaming this on a regular basis? Was there anything in particular?
Yeah, well, at the time that I picked it up, there were 2 other people who started streaming it, who were Glitch PhD and Black Chaos. Black Chaos isn't really active anymore, but I became really good friends with those 2. And then eventually there were enough of us who were playing the game regularly that we made a Skype group. So I was kind of part of this initial Skype group, and people were streaming, so I decided to do it myself. And I really kind of like enjoy, like it was kind of fun for me, because from going back to like the YouTube thing with Minecraft, I liked doing YouTube, but it was like a lot of effort because I felt like I had to pre-plan everything, right? The nice thing about streaming is you could just click the button and just start playing the game, and you could just start speedrunning. And that was like the really big draw for me. And what kind of pulled me away from the more YouTube-oriented stuff is, and especially as sort of like the chronic illness stuff kind of came into play, is it was so much it was so much more accessible for me. Yeah. In that sense.
So kind of moving towards where we are now, I did want to ask about your history. I know you are involved with Speedruns Rochester.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to ask, as much as you want to, I realize when you affix something to a location, you're on the risk of maybe sharing more information than you want to. But, if you can share some stuff with us about being involved with a, sort of a local speedrunning group, I would be very curious to hear, how you got into it and what it's been like.
Yeah. So SROC stands for Speedruns Rochester. I go to school in Rochester, New York, which is like the bay, like way west of New York City, like almost by the Canadian border and by the Great Lakes. And I go up here for school. I'm studying game design and development. That's kind of my major. And it turned out that the year I entered as a freshman, people were starting up the speedrun club at the school. And it was sort of like a multi-school thing. We had some people from RIT, which is the school I was at, U of R, and some of a couple people from like the local community college as well. And so I saw the flyer for it, and having already been a speedrunner, I'm like, oh dang, this is my calling.
Exciting. Yeah, exactly.
So I go to the call-out meeting, and I've been with it ever since, and now I'm staff, which is pretty cool. But as for like what we actually do, it's kind of chill. We basically it's a 6-hour club meeting on Saturday. Well, obviously when we aren't in a pandemic, it's a it's a 6-hour club meeting where every Saturday we just get together in a room on campus and we just speedrun or practice or just mess with stuff. So it's really cool. We have like a classroom, and people bring in like consoles and monitors. Some people even bring in PCs to do PC runs, like their little mini ITX builds, and stuff like that. And that kind of is like the foundation of like the main meetings. It's really kind of like a social thing where people are just sharing their craft, talking shop, especially about some of the more tech stuff like capture and all that. Rabbit hole,
live split, all the tools,
the tools, exactly. And it also helping like newer runners kind of get in, or people who are interested in the hobby, kind of getting them involved or giving them kind of a lens into what speedrunning is all about. And so we also do like other stuff too. So for example, we've run mystery tournaments, and for those who haven't heard of what a mystery tournament is, it's basically a tournament of blind speedrun races where you get a bunch of people in a room and you have them blind race a game they've never played before to a certain goal, whether that's to beat the game, to make it to a certain milestone, such as beating like the first boss. And it's really, really fun. We had a couple of those, and they've been really fun, and they've actually gotten people to try new speed games. Because we've done a lot of like itch.io games and a lot of like old school like Game Boy games and stuff that are like super easy to distribute. Wink. But those have been really fun because it just kind of gets everybody together, and it's nice. It's a really great icebreaker too for like a club setting, because it puts everyone on the same playing field, right? Because you might have people who are very new to speedrunning, and you might have speedrunning veterans who, to a new person might seem really unapproachable because it's like, oh, this person's like so good, right? I don't know how to like talk to them. But then you have an event like this where you can everyone's on the same footing, everyone's going into it with the same zero experience. And it's just a really great event. And then we also run like, more typical speedrun marathons. The most well-known one we do is normally in-person event at Toracon, which is an anime convention run by students at RIT, and we run a 2-day marathon there every in-person Toracon, and so that's been a lot of fun. We've actually been able to get people from other parts of tri-state to come in. We've even had some people from the Midwest drive out and do some runs. We had one co-op team come in and do a Golden Axe run once. That was super rad. So yeah, it's been a really fun thing. I've just made so many good friends through it. it's been so fun. Oh, and I saw it mentioned in chat. We get ice cream every meeting too.
Oh, well, there you go.
There's a Ben and Jerry's on campus, which has become very problematic for specific members, like myself. So, yeah,
got to sweeten the deal somehow.
That's kind of best rock.
Yeah, no, that sounds really neat. I mean, that's just, I think, it's just one of those things that works out, and obviously things are complicated right now, but it sounds like everyone's making the best of it. I'm not going to go into the details, but I do have a personal connection to Rochester, and so it's really cool to me to hear that kind of thing going on. That's a great town, and I was in there actually. I was up there November of 2019 for a wedding right before all that happened.
Oh, really?
And it was great to be back there, and it's just cool, always cool to hear about fun stuff going down there. Let's do some takes. Let's do some takes about speedrunning. So we established earlier that like the very first speedrun that you did without any recording was Ocarina of Time 3D. And then Chibi Robo was the one you got around to recording. So we got first game speedrun done. Of all the games that you have done runs of, what is your favorite speedrun?
That's a good question because different speed games do different things for me. Mm-hmm. I think the most, if I have to give like a really boilerplate answer, it'd probably be Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions for the DS, because that is one of the only games that I can consistently do no resets of, which I know sounds really ridiculous, but I am a reset monster. I am really bad about it, but I can just play that game over and over and over, no matter how I'm performing, and just have a good time with it. But like in terms of like busted games, I really like Neopets for the PS2, Neopets Darkest Fury. That's just really, really fun. Kind of in like a weird parasocial way, because people coming in seeing it for the first time are like, what the hell is going on? And it's kind of like that, not like Schadenfreude effect, but it, just like that kind of like secondhand.
Oh yeah, it's a parlor trick. You get to see the crowd react. It's it's a performance, right? It's like
exactly.
That's a great part of speedrunning, I think, is the performing aspect of it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, how about the opposite? Of all the speedruns that you've done, what's one that you're like, you know what? I didn't like this one. It wasn't for me. I'm probably not coming back.
Yeah, probably SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom, and not because it's a bad speedrun. It's like a S tier speed game.
Yeah, it's very popular.
I would say. But for me, what wasn't fun about that was partially wrist pain. Because one of the glitches, speed glitches in that game is actually fairly well known now, cruise boosting. For me personally, was a bit rough on my wrists. It's really cool, but if you mess it up, you have to do the inputs again, and if you have to practice it in order to be consistent. And my wrist just could not take it. And on top of that, there are other parts of the run that I didn't find as appealing. At least back when I used to run it. Things have kind of changed now as the speed game is developed in certain categories. One of the big turnoffs for me were the boss fights are kind of repetitive to me, except for the final boss, which is rad. But yeah, just certain like compromises that I just wasn't willing to make because I was just more in love with other speed games. You know.
Sure. No, it's that's a good answer, because you're taking all the factors and you're like, this is the one that shakes out sort of the least aligned with what I want to do. How about a game that you would like to speedrun, but you have not gotten around to it yet, either for time reasons or it doesn't fit with what you're doing right now?
So I actually have a really good answer to that. Medieval 2. Okay. So Medieval 1 is a game that I already run, and that's a really great run. Has great movement. Medieval 2 is a whole nother beast. So if you check out we actually showed the game off at GDQ. My buddy Jacobo the Chocobo showed the run off. The game has the first one has something called the speed glitch, where if you repeatedly tap forward in a certain rhythm, you gain extra speed on your base walking speed. But in Medieval 2, due to some physics engine changes, rather than it just being a constant speed increase, it stacks every time you do the input. So what that means is it's an hour-long run of you just mashing the ever-living crap out of the D-pad. And you go so fast but it's really hard to set up. And I've tried learning it a couple of times now, and both times I just bounced off it because it's so dang hard. It is probably the hardest game I've ever tried learning. But I do really want to learn it at some point, because I think the record for that game is almost 6 years old at this point. And I really want to see the game go down. And if someone's got to do it, I'll do it, you know.
Man, that's interesting. You know, I knew about you know, the way you just mentioned, which was you know, the Jacobo doing the run, you know, with doing commentary at GDQ. I just wasn't sure what the status of the sequel was in regards, and I can see it now. Yeah, it's 5 years old. Interesting. Well, you know, but I mean, maybe or maybe not. You'll get to it. We'll see. Yeah,
we'll see when I can break this crippling pumpkin jack addiction.
How about a favorite speedrun to watch that you have no plans to run yourself?
To watch, probably games from the Ratchet and Clank series. So Ratchet and Clank 2, Ratchet and Clank 3, even Ratchet and Clank 1 as well. That whole original trilogy of Ratchet games is really, really sick. It has amazing movement. I just don't see myself ever running it because I don't really have the hardware to do it. But I think it requires PAL for certain categories, and for the second game, you have to have a specific version of the disc, which can be a little hard to acquire. So that kind of has put me off a little bit. But that game's movement toolkit, holy crap! It looks so much fun to play. But
yeah, no, that's a good. I know I recently had the opportunity. I think it was actually it was last year probably, to talk to Dilwingo, who's been doing Ratchet and Clank too. So no, those are
Dill's a homie.
Those are neat. All right, so we got some takes. Let's keep on moving. So you mentioned earlier an issue of wrist pain, and this is usually a question that I ask runners, which is that, you know, when it comes to speedrunning, doing repetitive movements, things like that. Do you have any particular approaches to good health? I mean, it sounds like you did one good thing, which was to not do the thing in Bikini Bottom that hurt your wrists. But, you know, even stuff like Medieval 2, that sounds like it could affect you. Do you do anything in particular?
It depends. If I'm having like actual pain, like I've been actually pretty good lately. But posture and stretching are like the two biggest things I consider. If I'm playing a console game, it's a matter of like the way I'm holding the controller, right? Because I think like the way that you level like your controller when you're holding it can put some like extra strain on your wrists and like your elbows, even if you're not careful about it. So like if I'm like trying not to like, you know, put my, there's like I can't really like explain it like with English words super well. But like certain positions I've found to be a little bit more conducive to better posture than others. It's just been something, it's more just about keeping it in mind, right? Because it's a mindfulness thing, and just sort of building the habit of just like paying attention to your body, which is kind of something I learned from being an athlete. I was a distance swimmer in high school, and that's kind of like something you have to work on as an athlete, is that kinesthetic sense. So like paying attention to like your environment and how that's like hindering or helping you, I think that's something I try to consider. Health-wise as well, my case is a little bit different. I mentioned that I'm a type 1 diabetic, I think, at some point. And that poses its own set of challenges for me, because I have to manage my blood sugar. For those who don't know, basically when you eat food, it puts glucose into your bloodstream, and most people can regulate the levels of that. It goes up when you eat and goes down when you don't. Basic summary. I can't regulate that because I was born with diabetes. So as a result, I have had to learn how to either manage that mid-run or adjust the way that I approach speedrunning to compensate for that. So, for example, game selection is something that I consider. I tend not to run games that are super duper long, for example, because sometimes I might just need to cut a run so I can go take care of what I need to take care of. And, you know, cutting off a run an hour in of like a 2 or 3 hour run really sucks.
Yeah.
But if you cut off like a run that's only like 10 minutes into like a 20, 30 minute game, it's like, you know, I can just start up another run once I'm feeling better. Or for example, the content of the game can also be important. It could be a 30-minute game, but if it's a 30-minute game where I'm constantly doing inputs, that might not be as necessarily as healthy. Actually, kind of a hot take I have. I know a lot of people get mad about loading screens in their speed games. I think they are very important to speed games because I think people undervalue the rest that you need between individual segments and splits. Whether it's just a mental moment to like reset and to sort of adjust your mentality if you're like going for a PB, or to, physically dial down a little bit so you're less, emotionally or physically stressed. And, I like part of the reason why like Chibi Robo is a game that I run, even though it's pretty long for my particular interests, is that game has a lot of cutscenes. And what that means is that I kind of just mindlessly tap through the cutscenes and take a little bit of a break, because that game can be really intense in short bursts and in specific spots, especially if you have to do on-the-fly routing for that game, which is pretty common. But during cutscenes or dialogue, I can take a sip of water, I can check my blood sugar on my phone, I could grab myself a snack if I'm playing with my Wavebird that day, my wireless controller. So that's something I consider as well. And just sort of listening to my body, right? Sometimes I just, you just have to accept that your body has limitations. And, I've stretched myself thin before trying to push myself in ways that weren't healthy. Like, for example, when I first got diagnosed with diabetes when I was 18, I was really running the SpongeBob movie pretty aggressively at that time, and I was becoming really frustrated because my symptoms were starting to get really bad, and I didn't know how to deal with them yet because I was still developing those skills.
Right.
So something that I actually did is instead of just trying to push myself in this game and try to get the PB I wanted, I actually took a break from the game and I picked up a new run. I picked up SpongeBob's Truth or Square, which I picked up as a joke because that's another game that was actually made by the same people who made Battle for Bikini Bottom, the movie game, which people were vaguely familiar with, but no one really ran it because it was just kind of considered a joke. So I picked up a copy for like $5 on the Wii as a joke, and I have been running it for almost 4 years since.
There you go.
So it's one of those things where limitation breeds creativity, right? Like I probably, if it weren't for my diabetes, I don't know if I'd ever run Truth or Square. Like that's just the long and the short of it. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think just to underscore a point there is that when you have any sort of limitation, here you were talking about a specific limitation associated with chronic disease,
right.
But like even the most healthy person, you're going to run into limitations of joints and muscles and hands, etc. And like it's so important to listen to those. And even when you do run into these issues, listening to your body first, but also finding creative solutions is really helpful. As a funny example for me personally, I also do some music stuff, and I had a situation where playing trumpet was causing jaw discomfort. I went to an oral surgeon, told me that I was going to have to do like a $10,000 surgery to fix my jaw. I told my teacher at the time about this, and he said, "No, I'm going to give you a different mouthpiece." The mouthpiece got rid of the pain, and I also became a far better player. And I never got oral surgery. Hopefully, it's been about 10 years since that happened, so hopefully it doesn't come back to bite me in the ass.
Yeah.
Point is, obviously take care of yourself. Do listen to medical professionals when appropriate.
Yeah.
Don't always do what I did. But the other point too is that you end up finding I got better at my musical instrument. You found a better speed game for you. I don't know, a better speed game, but like a good speed game. You obviously enjoyed Truth or Square.
Yeah, and eventually I got to the point where once I got better at handling my stuff, I could actually play SpongeBob Movie again. Because I learned tricks like I can check my blood sugar during a loading screen, or I can give myself meds during a load, things like that people might not tell you, but you kind of just intuit.
Right.
Because everyone's different, right? Everyone's body is different. Everyone's situation is different. So just kind of like that intuition and that listening to yourself is really, I agree, that's really, really important.
All right, let's slide back to some more lighthearted takes because you have played a bunch of portable game speedruns. You've done a bunch of different console speedruns, which means I am confident that you have strong feelings about your favorite and least favorite controllers.
Oh yeah.
Please enlighten us.
Okay, so my I would say best controller wise for the games I run is DualShock 2.
Okay.
PS1 controllers are great. PS3 controllers are also pretty good, and DualShock 4s are also really awesome. Although I don't own one because college student. But
sure. That's fair. That's very fair.
PlayStation controllers have always just felt the best in my hand, and also tend to be able to take the most abuse for the most part. I like the GameCube controller too. Triggers are really bad. I think the GameCube controller is a great controller if you're willing to modify it to your needs. But like the default controller is kind of. I think the only reason people like it is because they've played with it for so long. It's like the N64 controller too. Like that thing is just like objectively garbage. Like it's so bad. I don't understand. I played Smash 64 with my cousins when I was 5. So you can't use your, you didn't grow up with an excuse. I grew up with it. It's still bad. It's so bad. Sorry, I got a little tilted there.
No, that's fair. Honestly, I had a thing just recently where I was trying to play the GameCube version of a game, and and I just got so frustrated with the shoulder buttons on the GameCube controller.
Yeah.
And then I played the PS2 version of it, and I was like, yeah, this is great. Like, why I should have just done this from the beginning.
Yeah. Just give me the analog buttons.
Yeah, I don't know. It's so strange.
Yeah.
And also I don't know why did you even bother putting that D-pad on the GameCube controller? I
don't know what it is.
Why it's so tiny.
Controller, but the PS2 controller has an awful D-pad. Xbox controllers, terrible D-pads. GameCube controllers. Yeah, I don't know if the Dreamcast has a D-pad, but it probably is bad too.
Oh no, the Dreamcast controller is just a complete train wreck. I don't even want to talk about that thing.
Looks like some PDA. Like I'm just gonna read this like a tablet.
Oh, I don't know. I don't mind the VMU, but the little thing. But the actual buttons, like the actual stick and the triggers.
Yeah, those look fine.
Those are weird. All right,
it's like a malformed Duke.
I also wanted to ask too, just because you've done portable stuff as well.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite like DS or 3DS revision?
For Vision?
Revision. I mean, like
revision.
Yeah. Because obviously,
revision.
Like with DS and 3DS, you have all these different versions of it. I mean, you may not have choices because my guess is that your capture setup probably demands that you use a particular version. But
I'll just kind of briefly explain the way 3DS capture and DS capture by extension generally works. The way it primarily works is through the use of like hard mods that people in like these capture boards that people install directly into the console and have like a USB mini out on the backside. And so the two major manufacturers for these boards were Loopy from the United States and Katsukity from Japan. And Katsukity actually went out of business because the Japanese government got on their ass.
I know,
but
I gave
tragic.
I gave them $500 right before they went out of business.
No, I'm so sorry. Oh, I just unplugged my headset.
Shout outs to
I believe.
You in there?
Motor coordination. We're good.
Hear me?
We're good. I can hear you.
The good news is that that PayPal did refund me the money.
That's good.
I don't know what happened to that.
Still frustrating, though.
Still frustrating, yeah.
I think Loopy does make them still now, and Loopy is generally the one people swear by, just based on build quality, and he'll repair it if you send it back to him. But for a while, neither of them were making them. So there's like a whole like used market on like eBay and forums and stuff like that. I'll actually go grab my DS real quick. It's just sitting on the table over here. So this is the DS that I actually used for GDQ. So it's an original 3DS XL. So what that means, so there is like the new 3DS XL, which has like a tiny right thumbstick right above the X button. Very, very small. And a couple extra shoulder buttons that are also very small. So this is like the revision before that. It's actually the X and Y like collector's edition, like the bundle version. I just got lucky. And I mostly play Chibi Robo Park Patrol and Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions on this thing. And interestingly enough, I'm not a super big fan of the circle pad when I play original DS games, because even though like, the circle pad would support, in theory, 360 movement, for DS games, it just maps to 8 directions. So I actually, when I first started playing Spider-Man, I actually found that super limiting. So I actually use the D-pad, and if you look at the location of the D-pad, it's underneath the circle pad in a really awful spot. So when I play Spider-Man, I have my left thumb down here and my right thumb way up here, and it took a lot of getting used to. But it's actually not that bad, quite frankly. Believe it or not, the DS has a good D-pad.
Yeah, no, the DS D-pad's not bad at all, for sure. That works out at least. That one holds up. So, while we're on this topic of hardware, because I was going to ask about, your capture setup, because I know portable game capture setup is always an ordeal. We already talked a little bit about some of what you do with capture, in regards to when you got into speedrunning Chibi Robo.
Right.
I did also want to ask, with this kind of stuff, there is like a horrible gaping maw money pit that surrounds some of this stuff when it comes to things like OSSCs, BVMs, stuff like that. What is your approach to capturing stuff like 6th gen consoles? Like, do you only play on CRT, or do you have some sort of converter for HDMI? What do you do?
I'm one of those weird people who isn't like a CRT loyalist. So my setup, I use a StarTech USB 3 for like actual capture. And so the way that works, you have to like split the signal so that like HDMI goes into the capture card and then up to your monitor, right? So the setup that I use is I use an OSSC. So that's an open source scan converter. It's a little 3D printed box of magical goodness that upscales RGB and component signals into HDMI, which I can then just plug straight into my monitor. So the cables I use depend on the console, because my PS2, for example, natively outputs RGB.
Yep.
So I use an S-cart cable for that, and it looks good. Like it was worth it. In other words, even though it is a bit of a money pit, like you said.
Right.
But for most of my other stuff, I use component cables. So for my Wii, for the OG Xbox, I just picked up for some of the other games I run, I use component cables, and you can plug both signals into OSSC, and it just works, which is quite lovely. But specifically for PS2, I actually do something a little more complicated. I have what's called a FreeMic boot card. It looks like a standard PS2 memory card, but it has this using like a memory card exploit. It runs on boot and just lets you do some soft modded stuff without affecting your PS2, which is really nice.
Yeah, it's really good. It's a firmware update exploit that didn't get patched until the last revision of the PS2. Yeah. It's very funny. Look it up if you're not familiar with it. It's
so good. So I run on a 770K PS2. If I wanted better load times, I could run on a 990K, but that's another money pit.
Sure. Yeah.
So what I do is when I boot up my PS2, I run a program off the FreeMic boot called GSM, which allows you to actually adjust the output resolution of the PS2. So I actually am able to like adjust it to be like 480p.
You have just solved a puzzle for me. Thank you. So it should be built into your FreeMic boot if you have one. I have never used OSSC. I primarily use FreeMic boot for the purposes of doing open PS2 loader stuff off of a hard drive, an SD card setup. The puzzle you solved for me, the last live speedrun event that I did was, if you're familiar with MagFest.
Oh yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I did a speedrun for MagFest, and I was doing a PS2 speedrun. I was doing a New Game Plus run. So, of course, I brought my memory card with me, so I would have, the save file for the New Game Plus run. And they were already kind of having technical problems. And then when I sat down, I put the disc in, put my memory card in, pulled out whatever memory card was in there, and like nothing would capture correctly. And eventually some other tech person came back along and it was like, oh, I have to have this memory card in there when it boots to get the graphical setting that the capture equipment is looking for.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was like, what the hell does the memory card have to do with the converter? I just wasn't familiar with it. And I probably could have looked the answer up, but you answered the question for me then. That's very funny. Interesting.
The whole reason I even went through that, I got the free McBoot for Neopets actually because Neopets on the PS2 is another game that I run, and one of the other runners of the game actually created a whole suite of practice tools that you can load in through free McBoot. If you run the ELF file and then load up the game. And that lets you do a whole bunch of really cool stuff that I'm happy to go into if you're interested in that rabbit hole. But he told me about the GSM on the memory card too, so I set that up, and it helped. I like it because it kind of, I don't know, sunk cost fallacy. It helps me feel like I got more out of the investment.
Well, real quick, so we're gonna get to games in just a second here. I wanted to run by one more thing. We've talked a lot about capture. How we view the games, the video signals we're getting out of it. And one thing that I think about a lot, I'm a person who doesn't like collecting, and B, I'm also concerned with investing in stuff that seems ill-fated to die soon. Yeah. And we're approaching the expiration dates on a lot of lasers right now. A lot of moving parts, I feel, from this generation of consoles. They're starting to go. And you can go down further the money pit, find a 90K PS2 or whatever the case might be. I feel like in the long run it'll all be emulation.
Yeah.
What is your feeling on stuff like optical drive emulators? PS2 loading from hard drive using OPL. What sort of? Obviously anything you do in speedrunning, be honest about your setup. Putting that aside. What is your feeling about stuff like, GDMU or GameCube loader, stuff like that? Like, do you think that, would people be doing runs on that? Or is the path from real hardware straight to emulation?
I don't think it'll be straight to emulation because I think so one thing that affects like speedrun accessibility for games from this era is getting your hands on a copy of the game.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I'll give you an example. Chibi Robo. Average, just the disc, no manual, no box, $60. That's a big deal for a lot of people if they want to try the Chibi Robo speedrun. They could, go for the cheaper Japanese version, but, then they have to play in a language that they don't natively understand.
Harder, yeah.
And so I think in a lot of ways, I think it's very important that we have these pathways for people to be able to compete on whatever they have going for them. I've always been a fan of generally separate categories. That's the way that Medieval is set up, where you have a console leaderboard and an emulator leaderboard. And that's a little bit different because games can have like unique stuff depending on the platform they're on. For example, in Medieval, there's actually a strat on the final boss that crashes on console but only works on emulator. So there's differences like that will probably come up as like, maybe 10, 20 years down the line, this really starts to get rolling. But I'm not one of those people who hates emulator. I use emulator for practice sometimes. Like if I'm glitch hunting, emulator is so helpful. Just being able to use save states and all that, super helpful. But for me personally, I've never been one of those people who's been super like, oh, we got to make sure, I've always been about the honor system and about building a community of people where we have mutual respect and trust for each other, rather than being crazy policing on, verifying people's runs and all of that. Because at the end of the day, for me, speedrunning is about the people I meet through it. Right.
For sure.
And I like speedrunning. It's a lot of fun. But the people you meet through speedrunning are like no one else. And to me, if we can get more people into speedrunning, I say we take that opportunity, right? So, but in terms of like the way that we go about doing that, I think it's on a game-by-game basis, honestly, because in some games, running on emulator is actually slower than console. Battle for Bikini Bottom is a great example of that. So in that case, like, just allow the emulator runs. Like, why not?
Right.
SpongeBob Movies, kind of the same way. The load times are slower on emulator than they're on console. I would, just allow it. But in other games, they've taken different approaches. Scooby-Doo, Night of 100 Frights, which is made by the same people, runs a bit faster on emulator from loading times. So we do a different solution there where we allow people on emulator to submit runs so that they can get a feel for the game, but until a certain time cutoff based on relevant distance to the world record. Mm-hmm. So that way we want to encourage people to play on console because that's the most fair, evenly balanced way to compete. But at the same time, we give people that window to decide if that's, the speed game for them. Because, again, nobody wants to make that investment if they don't know this is something that they really want.
Yeah. You don't want to buy all that stuff before you really know you want it.
Like, even just getting things, like, offhand, like, it does add up. And, gaming in general has, like, that kind of financial accessibility problem. Mm-hmm. But speedrunning is kind of, it's, like, not, like, more so, but it's, like, its own unique wheelhouse to that.
Yeah.
And I've always been more on the pro accessibility side. I'm not one of those crazy purists, like, you have to do it this way, or like you gotta, I don't know. I think, we're all gonna just return to the dust of, I know this is going super deep. We're all returning to the dust of the earth anyway.
Yeah.
Why stress over it when we can just bring people together? That's how I feel.
Let's get into games. I want to get the stories here on how you got into some of these particular games because we have some interesting talent. I'm going to start with what I feel like is the most bonkers run. If you have not seen a speedrun of Neopets: The Darkest Fairy, please consider watching it. It is very, very, very good. Lots of very good animations, flying out of bounds, all sorts of fun things. What is your personal history with this game? Did you have this game and play it when you were a kid?
So we had this game growing up. My brother and I, when
did you play Neopets online? Did you have accounts?
We did, actually. Okay. We had an account, and so that's how my brother, because we had a old Dell desktop machine that was our family's first shared computer, and we played Neopets online on like Internet Explorer all those years ago. And so we were familiar with Neopets, and we walked into GameStop one day to purchase a game that we had saved up for. And there was this cardboard cutout sign, promotional. It's one of those things where they have like the little mini like display video player embedded into the cardboard that has like a trailer in it. They had one of those at GameStop for this Neopets game on the PS2. And my brother and I looked at each other like, we're buying this game when it comes out. So we bought it. Again, that was one of those games that we had growing up, but because our PS2 died, we had no way to play it. So we ended up Goodwilling it. And so as I was getting into speedrunning, what I would do for a lot of the games I run, I would, check the speedrun to see what they were like because I was curious. And so back then, the world record for the game was 1 hour and 22 minutes. By then Pokemon Rocks, now known as Colquill, who has run a whole bunch of different games over the years, but was the world record holder at the time for this game. And I was hooked because it reminded me of all the Zelda stuff. I'll probably go into a bit more detail, but this game is basically furry bait Twilight Princess. It's this open world 3D action adventure game where you go around, do quests, be a good knight, all that jazz, but in the Neopets universe. So we liked Zelda, we liked this game. It was perfect. And so I'm like, okay, I got to learn this now because this just looks too cool.
Now, since
I 12-hour challenged it, yeah.
Oh, you 12-hour challenged it. One thing I was curious about, because, as you mentioned, the speedrun had been around since before you had picked it up. You picked it up in the context of a 12-hour challenge. Have you been able to contribute to this game? Because my understanding, it looked to me like when I watched your current PB, which I think is also question mark world record.
Yeah, it's a 42-minute run. So.
Right. So it looked to me like there was some new tech in that, maybe new routing. Yeah. Is that stuff that you've been contributing? Like, how involved have you been with improving the route for this?
I have been, for that game specifically, I have been more involved with optimization.
Okay.
Finding better setups for certain tricks, finding slightly faster but more difficult, thing like setups for glitches and stuff. That's kind of always been my focus with that game. So what happened to make the game get even shorter was when a new member joined our community, Monster860. He is also the person who wrote the practice tools for the game, but he started disassembling the game's code to sort of learn more about the game. And he originally did this because there was a bunch of unused music tracks in the game that he wanted to rip in higher quality and put on YouTube, because for preservation reasons.
Yeah, absolutely.
But as he was doing this, he started to discover more and more things about the game and the way it was set up. And one of the things he found is that we believe that roughly a quarter of the game never got finished. And one of the things that is left over in the game's data is this loading trigger that was part of a castle re-entrance sequence to Meridel, which is like the main town of the game. And they never ended up finishing that bit, but the loading trigger they made for that is still in the game's code. So he figured out a way to get into the castle, which normally took a giant detour for us to go do because of other glitches that are kind of complicated to explain. And that just cut off, like, I don't know, 30 minutes, I think?
Good, good. Yeah, there you go.
Because we visit the castle twice, so you do so it saves double the amount of time, so it's a little hard to do the math in my head, but... So that's what brought the game initially down from like an hour 22 to sub hour. At SGDQ 19, I believe we did some like races in the practice room, and I think Cole got like a 56, which was pretty insane. But just like more and more stuff got found over time, and stuff is still getting found for the game. Most recently, which got found, which is really, really funny, is an infinite money glitch. And so basically, after setting up a kind of weird text overflow, if you talk to the sign over and over, it just gives you infinite money. And that allows you to buy these speed potions that are basically like skooma from the Oblivion run, if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
We used to run the game with about 7 of those from some quests that we did. But now we have infinite. So now we're just running around at light speed. So that's like a new thing that's been found.
Okay, yeah, because I knew from watching the run that the infinite money thing came up, but I wasn't sure. I guess I must have missed the part where that translated into the speed, because I certainly noticed the speed. Y'all walking around real fast.
Yeah, because we used to start off that segment with 7 potions, and now we get like 25. And that's like enough to carry, because the run is so short now that you can just get that money and just go straight to the end of the game with extra. It's pretty wild. So it's like a lot of it's been Monster. Monster has contributed so much to the game and has just done so much work that it's without him that like none of like me playing like I wouldn't have probably still be playing it by now, because I think the game would have been solved without him, frankly. Because how are we supposed to know? We didn't even know how to get out there to find that trigger. It's out in the middle of nowhere, and that's what's crazy about it.
No, that's really neat. I mean, that's sort of the invaluable assistance that comes from someone going and doing code diving like that, is because so like you can get answers, like you can know things when you have someone doing that in a way that you can discover stuff by playing and testing, but you're not gonna like know. You know, a trigger. I mean, it's perfect example, like is what you just said. That here out in the space there is a loading trigger.
Yeah, and it's also been accelerated by the fact that Monster wrote the practice tools. So to go into a little bit of what he wrote, it's like a file that you run before loading up the game. Obviously, you can't use it during a run, but it allows you to basically load into any area you want. It lets you give yourself quest items or consumables, so you can set up a practice file with speed potions for movement. You can it allows you to look at specific addresses and actually like change flags within the game for testing purposes. It lets you display your XYZ coordinates on screen, which was really helpful when revive warping got discovered, which allows you to warp to a specific set of coordinates on a different save file. So that was instrumental in working with that. being able to save without using a save point, so you can save out of bounds if you want to practice a glitch and just reload the save whenever you screw up. Things like that really accelerated the progress of the game, and so like I can't understate like how important that was. But also on top of that, a lot of stuff that's like crucial to run got discovered many, many years ago, mostly by Cole. So I think I've kind of not mentioned it up until this point. The game's probably most famous glitch is something called ledge flying. You get this quest item called the Cloak of Potatoes. I said the Cloak of Potatoes because it looks like a potato set. But the Cloak of Heroes has this property where if you equip it and de-equip it, it creates a ton of lag. And you can use it to do all sorts of things. And the most important one is if you do it near a ledge in a specific way, you can actually start floating away from the ledge and through walls. And so that's been around for years and is really like the backbone of the run. So that it's been kind of a combination of like that old tech in the SDA days from runners like Cole, but also like this new stuff too. So
do you have future plans for this right now? Because like certainly it seems like I don't know if this is the sort of run, like I don't know how difficult some of these clips are, if like too many things went right in your PB for you to want to revisit it, you know? Or is this a situation where, you know, someone's going to come along, grind this and probably improve it?
Yeah, I do want to come back to it because my current PB is a 42:15 and the minute barrier is right there. And I'm one of those people who really likes those juicy minute barriers. But like at the same time, I'm starting to this is one of the games I'm really trying to push for SGDQ. And what I'm trying not to do is burn myself out of the game with a grind like that. Because that will probably end up being a grind just based on, I had some mistakes obviously, but you know, because what I found, and we can probably bring these up later, for the games that I ran at GDQ, I found that because I was prepping for them so much in advance, that by the time the runs were over, I just didn't want to grind them anymore because, you know, I just didn't feel motivated enough to PB, and I don't want the same thing to happen in Neopets because it was on backup. Yeah. So I feel like there was a good chance. So I don't want this to happen again because I love this game. You look like you want to mention something else.
No, actually, I was going to mention exactly what you just said. That I was just going to confirm that it was on backup for GDQ, and I was going to ask if you're going to try and submit it to another GDQ, and you answered that too. So maybe it is time that we talk about those GDQ runs. So you had 2 runs at AGDQ 2021. One of them was Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions. One of them was Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights, which you did as a race. What is your story with Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions? Of course, that's specifically the DS game. Yes. Which is, I say game because it is a separate game than what would have appeared on home consoles. Right. Was that one you played back then, or did you come to this more recently?
No, this. So if I didn't play a game growing up, and that's how I started to speedrun it. One of the great things about running obscure games is you get to know a lot of other people who run obscure games just by the shared space and all that. So I was actually turned on to this game by Mr. Shasta, who's pretty well known in the handheld speedrunning community, and this was a game that he had learned, and he was the only runner for it. And so I saw him streaming the game one day, and I'm like, wow, this looks amazing. I need to play it. So I bought the game, I played it, and then I proceeded to play it 8 more times all the way through. It was that damn good. And then I was going, I think I mentioned this earlier, I was going to 12-hour challenge it, but I couldn't help myself. I learned it early. And so I grinded and grinded and grinded that game for almost a year and a half. That game's move. So for those who don't know, the DS version of Shattered Dimensions is a 2D Metroidvania platformer with Spider-Man powers. And so what that means is you have all these web zipping moves that you can do to like pull yourself off the ceilings and walls and stuff. And there's like so many different ways that you can go about it. Like you can do different setups, and everyone kind of has their own way of playing through it. And it was so addictive. Sometimes you just get a game like that that's just like, how does nobody know about this? So sometimes when I get a game like that, I feel like this obligation to try to get it into marathons so that I can get more people to play it. Because I feel like a speedrun can be like a really good pitch for people to try a game or to even learn it. And so that's what I did. I grinded it to try to get help, because Shasta had been trying to get it into GDQ for a couple years at that point and had no success. Because getting into GQ is really hard.
Sure, very competitive. Lots of people submit good games.
Yeah, and even me, I had submitted for like 2 or 3 GDQs and got rejected across the board. But a GDQ, it finally happened, and it went really, really well. It was a lot of fun, and for me at least, I just try to put on a good show for people, so like to try to make the game look as good as possible. This is gonna sound kind of weird, but especially when I do like marathon stuff, like I want the games I run to outlive me, right? And this kind of goes back to sort of the chronic disease thing, where it's just like it's gonna sound weird for a 22-year-old to say I know, but I'm a little more aware of my own mortality than most people, because sometimes with diabetes, if you're having a rough week, sometimes you don't know if you're gonna wake up the next morning, or if you're going to have to go to the hospital if something gets really bad. And that's just the nature of the thing. So sometimes, and that's not always healthy, but sometimes I have this pressure on myself to put on these good shows for people so that people are still playing these games long after I'm gone. And, I believe it was a success with Spider-Man. I actually got bopped in that game not too long ago.
I did notice that. I saw that on the leaderboard. I was like, crazy. Fresh competition.
And I'm not surprised because the guy the Master Pro, who's the runner who ended up beating me, also is the world record holder for Web of Shadows DS, which is in the same engine as Shadow Dimensions DS.
That makes sense, yeah.
So he had a lot of legacy going into it. But even just getting more people to run the game and to try it, or even just, showing a cool game to people. Like I shouldn't have done this because I know this is like just a recipe for disaster, but I went back and looked at the Twitch chat during my run to see what people's reactions were, because when I do marathon commentary, I try to look for more candid feedback because I try to improve what I do in my craft. And just watching people be like, all right, I'm getting a copy of this game now, from people. I'm just like, yes, that's just like, that's exactly what I want. Even if people don't speedrun it, I just want people to play this game because like the devs work so hard on making this really cool thing. I think the devs actually tweeted about it when they saw like the GQ tweet. It was really crazy. And I'm one of the devs. Thanks for running this. I'm just like, wow. It's just it's one of those things that just makes it all worth doing. Kind of all wraps together.
No, it's really neat. So you did that one, and that is a great VOD. I definitely recommend going and watching that. It's hard for us talking like this to do justice to how neat the movement is. It really is just, you have to see it to believe it. Now, this isn't the first time this game has come up on this podcast. Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights. Making its return. We last mentioned when I had Waifu on. So I think this one, maybe you mentioned earlier, is a game that you would have grown up with. Yeah,
so my brother and I grew up with this one, and this would have been one of the games that I kept because my brother kind of bounced off it a little bit more. He didn't like it as much, but I kind of connected a bit more with the game. For those who have not tried it, it's made by the same people who made Bow for Bikini Bottom. It's a 3D Metroidvania platformer, which sounds weird for a Scooby game. And if you check the comments on the YouTube VOD, there's a lot of people saying the thing. But no, it literally is. You go from... It's kind of like a Crash Bandicoot 3D Metroidvania, where it's got some of these more, standard 3D levels, but you've also got some of these 2.5D kind of levels where you're kind of going through these linear paths that kind of branch out everywhere, and you get these different power-ups to help you throughout the game. As Metroidvanias go, though, it's very easy to sequence break it. And I think what makes the game really cool is like the movement of it. There's like this charge attack that Scooby does, and it lets you build up some speed, which is pretty fun. But if you cancel the animation early, it actually loses you speed because the animation has a wind up to it. So a lot of the runners have like sort of perfected this craft of knowing where to place these charge inputs in order to maximize the speed. And it's probably one of the larger communities I've been a part of, which sounds pretty weird, but there's a lot of people running the game. So this was another game that I 12-houred. And when I picked up the game a couple years ago, the game was fairly inactive when I played it. There were a couple of people still playing the game. I think Admiral and Baz were people who were still playing the game at the time. But it wasn't like until after I started running, about a year after I started running, that people really started to pop off and pick up the run. But I would have been a sophomore in college when I started running the game, and it's been a lot of fun. The Scooby community is really great. They are a really amazing group of people. And I say this a lot about pretty much every game that I run. The community is amazing. But there's something about small, like obscure games that just have the best communities. Because there's just so much less ego about it, you know? Like people like, it's so much more laid back. It's chill. People are so friendly and willing to help you out. It's a really great vibe. And the Scooby community is a prime example of that. And it was really crazy too that we got into GDQ with the game as well, because it's the Scooby-Doo game, and that was what was really crazy to us. There were a lot of other good licensed games that got submitted that GDQ, and that they took Scooby and that they took our race was the big thing. So I actually raced we did the GDQ run as a race. So it was me versus Snowy Moogle and what's called No CE or Creepy Early, which is a trick that's exclusive to the Xbox version of the game that turns the run into like a 15-minute run and cuts the two most interesting movement levels of the game. So we ran that as a race, and it was a lot of fun. We actually went pretty close. It was kind of an interesting situation because Snowy was definitely the better runner at the time. I still think that would still be the case, although both of us are kind of burned out. Especially
it happens.
Snowy. And the game has kind of taken a different direction since after GDQ and some discoveries got found.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about that too.
Right.
Yeah, but it was a really great time, and again, people enjoyed it. There was something weird that happened too, as well. I think where there's like Easter eggs in the game, where like on certain holidays, like it will play fireworks, like 4th of July, it'll play fireworks. And some of the devs' birthdays, we think, have some of those effects, and that actually happened to Snowy. In the middle of the GDQ run, it swapped over from 11 to midnight and caused new effects to happen. And Snowy still won the race with that distraction, so that was pretty funny.
Yeah, it's funny to think about because the 6th generation consoles generally do have system clocks with dates, operating in them. I feel like some games we think of it more than others. I know the Xbox, if you unplug an Xbox and then plug it back in and boot it up, it's like, hey, it's November 2001. How's it going, buddy? And I'm like, no, it's not. Shut up. But even on the PS2, of course, that is in fact there. I mean, that's why you have that that beautiful dashboard system clock that we all love. And I remember watching that. That was really stunning. They just started getting those fireworks effects in the middle of the run. Yeah,
and it's funny too because when we were prepping for that, it happened to me, and I actually fixed it. But Snowy is from British Columbia, so Snowy's in a whole nother time zone. So Snowy didn't even bother to think about that because it was still early evening for Snowy then. And so by the time the run actually happened, it was just super crazy coincidental, I guess.
How did you? So you had the opportunity. I want to get this comparison question here. You did a solo run with one commentator, and then I think with the other run, you had both of you were in on the call. And did you have one or two commentators in the race? I forget.
We had one commentator, Nastani.
One commentator. How did you feel about those different setups? I feel like especially doing an online event race with everybody in the call. How was that? Would you change anything about how you did that?
Honestly, it went really, really well. We practiced a lot, and I have to give a huge shout out to Nastani. Nastani honestly worked about as hard, if not harder, than either me or Snowy for the GDQ run. Because not only did he practice the commentary super duper hard, because for some sections he had to solo commentate because Snowy and I had to focus on making certain cycles and such. But at the same time, he also wanted to make sure that there were updated tutorials by the time that the GDQ run dropped. So we spent that entire week leading up to the run just grinding out a new tutorial video for the beginner route, which is called No GGS. And on top of that, everything just kind of fell into place. What I wanted out of that run was for it to be a close race, because that's what generates hype, and for it to be fun and the commentary to be good. And especially in a race setting, I find that when I do GDQ or commentary in general, I try to be careful, because if I don't keep it in check, I tend to be the main talker. generally. And so what I wanted to try to do was to try to, let Snowy and Nastani really shine through, because they're also really good at commentary. And, this is also their opportunity too. So I think I did an okay job of that, but, at some points I feel like I should have shut up a little bit. But in terms of the setup and how we did things, it was pretty great. It was really, they make it really easy on you. It's actually really nice.
Oh yeah, no, the tech folks, all the producers and everything, they do an excellent job with GDQ stuff. All right, I wanted to, before we start heading for the exit of the formal script, I did want to touch in. We already talked about Chibi Robo and how that was something that helped you get in early, the capturing with that. So I wanted to just do a quick drive by on how is it that you got into Medieval, because that's older than a lot of the games we're talking about are like mid 2000s games. Medieval, that's a PS1 game. How'd you end up speedrunning that?
This is an interesting one. I was in Ecdices's chat. If you don't know who he is a horror game speedrunner.
I think OverBoost number 9, I think is
I didn't know he was on the show.
So I got him, yeah.
Yeah. But people in his chat were in his stream were talking about the game Medieval. And talking about how it was like this, spooky little. I think they were making comparisons to something Ecdices was running at the time. And they were talking about how it was this 3D PS1 platformer that was kind of action adventure, and I'm like, oh, this sounds like my thing. And so I googled the game to see what it was about, and I decided to buy Medieval 1 and 2 and give them a try casually, and I really enjoyed it. And then I learned the run. It was kind of one of those weird things. Now this is one of those instances where I didn't 12-hour it. I would not recommend 12-houring Medieval, because the two OG Medieval games are some of the hardest games I've ever tried speedrunning. It took me 2 weeks to learn Medieval 1. I'm not even exaggerating. That game is super, super hard. And not even just because casually, but some of the glitches are really hard too. So yeah, it was one of those kind of weird scenarios. I just heard about it on the grapevine and just decided on it. And then the community itself kind of got me further hooked in, because everyone was super friendly. Yeah. Cool.
No, that's interesting. I think too, you've talked about games that you have picked up because they were favorite childhood games of yours, but also too, I think you've had two examples here. One was Mr. Shasta and Spider-Man, and here you were involved with Ecdices community. You saw people talking about Medieval, and that paid off. I'm gonna start moving for the exit of the formal script here. One of the things I do to connect the interviews together is I'll kind of do a question relay where I get a question from my previous guest to hand off to the next one. My previous guest was Apache Smash, Metal Gear Solid Runner, Saf for Metal Gear Speedrunners. And he had this question for my next guest, which was, and you are welcome to apply this to whatever speedrunning community you want to apply it to.
Sure.
What have you done personally to help make your community a better place? How have you contributed?
I think the thing I try to do the most is set an example, if that makes sense. And I of course I'm human. I'm no saint, but my theory on people, especially because a lot of the communities I'm involved in, even though they're starting to become older games, the communities tend to be generally younger. A lot of times people in those communities tend to look up to people based on gameplay. Which that's you can go into all sorts of psychoanalysis on how flawed that is, but that's just a matter of fact. The people who are the top runners tend to be the people who have their behaviors modeled after. And so what I try to do is I try to be a model for the type of community that I want to see. So, for example, being supportive of the LGBT community is really important for me. Even before, I realized that I was, at the same time, I had experiences in the Smash community where I used to play Super Smash Flash 2 competitively. I know that sounds kind of outlandish, but that community, especially back when I started speedrunning, was kind of toxic. A lot of bad stuff was getting flung around, and the speedrunning community was a lot more friendly in that way, but I also didn't want to become complacent, right? So
Sure.
I think it was, especially, anyone here who has that kind of, sphere of influence in a community, I think it's really important to be explicit about these kinds of things, not just kind of like reactive, if that makes sense. So like, for example, like you can ban someone who says a slur, right? And that's great. That is a good thing to do. But at the same time, I think it's also important to actively be supporting those kinds of marginalized groups, or actively be supporting people, and that can be as simple as, just chilling out in people's streams and being friendly and showing positive encouragement to people. Because, you want to have a community where we, positively encourage everyone. And that's not always the case. And, it's really easy to take those things for granted, right? But my philosophy is, I think it's important to actively foster those kinds of things. I don't know if that answers the question.
No, I think that answers the question. Honestly, I think that was probably the sort of answer that Apache was looking for. Which is to say, what do you do to make it a community, to make it a place that people want to be a part of? Because I think what you brought up, moderation and that kind of labor is necessary and important and an essential part of maintaining an internet community. But at the same time, you're taking out the garbage for a reason, which is to have this thing that is so personally enriching and rewarding. So no, I think that's exactly right. Now, but that does mean that I do need from you a question for my next guest. It doesn't have to be about speedrunning. It will be answered by a speedrunner, but you can make it about anything. I've gotten questions. I've had like favorite dessert. I've had like music questions. You can do whatever you want, but it will be a speedrunner answering.
Right. I have an interesting one. So I remember when I watched your interview with Enigma, and you talked about how you don't get enough food questions. Okay. So I have a food related question for you.
All right.
For your next guest, I want to ask them, what is a food that you hate the smell of but enjoy the taste of, and why?
Oh, I'm going to be very.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I get you. That it's you don't like the smell, but you do enjoy chowing down on it.
Yeah, because everyone is there's always that question of like, what do you enjoy the smell of but hate the taste of? And everyone says coffee, and it's not an interesting question. But I thought the other way around would be kind of funny.
All right, so as is my usual custom here, I'm gonna let you know who it is. You might recognize this. This is another obscure speedrunner, I would say. I don't know if they would say this, but but this should be a fun one. I'm looking forward to that. This person has run a bunch of games that I've like watched runs of.
I'm so glad you're getting him on the show.
So yeah,
he's a good friend of mine.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, I'm looking forward to it then. So he'll be the recipient of that question. What about future games that you're looking out for? You're like, I might play this on launch. You're excited about it.
Like releases.
Yeah, upcoming releases that you're keeping an eye on.
Well, there are a couple of things that released recently. I'm trying to think.
You can mention recent releases. Unfortunately, again, like so many other things, I feel like we've entered the part of the pandemic where development was lightly impacted, and so I feel like we're seeing very few releases right now, which is understandable. I would rather people be healthy than make video games in an infectious environment.
Right. So Blue Fire came out recently, which was something I was kind of getting excited for, which is a kind of a 3D Zelda-like game with some Dark Souls-y stuff thrown in there for good measure. That just came out and appears to be a pretty good run. I don't know if I'm actually going to pick it up yet. I've heard there's some like crashes and stuff that need to get fixed, but that was something I was kind of looking forward to.
I actually, so 2 weeks ago, I had Emre on the pod. And they were running that, and so I watched what it looked like 2 weeks ago, and it seemed pretty good. I don't know how it's obviously it's
developed, but
right. We're so close to launch, so things are probably constantly changing.
Yeah. In terms of like upcoming games, like long term, there's this one game that I've actually like been really interested in. I don't know when it's going to release. It's called Misk: A Tiny Tale. It's a 3D platformer in development, and it is I think it's for PC and maybe other platforms. I'm not sure. It's Chibi Robo inspired. So you play like this little robot made out of miscellaneous objects, hence the name. Like you're made out of a tin can and a couple of tiny little light bulbs and some pins and other various metal objects. And it's a little 3D collectathon. And it looks really, really promising so far. The devs actually gave me the opportunity to play a pre-release build of the first level, which was really really cool opportunity. And they've been kind of active with the Chibi Robo scene, so that was really cool. Definitely would. I can get you all some information in the Q&A later if you all are interested. So that's probably the other one that I'm really looking forward to in the future. There's also this game that was shown off in like the PlayStation Direct, for lack of a better term.
The State of Play.
Yeah, the State of Play. So there's this like game where it's like this 3D like movement based platformer where you have like a bow and you like shoot at targets to build up speed. I don't remember what the name of that game is, but it looks rad. So I was really looking forward to that. And then also whatever game Solar Ash, the game that the Hyperlight Drifter devs are making, that also looks really promising too.
How about, so we're making our way towards the exit of the script, and folks, if you're watching, there will be an opportunity for live Q&A once we wrap up the script. So if you have any questions, give them in mind. Who should people in the community know more about? If you could flip a switch and put more eyeballs on a one person or a few people, who would those be?
Let me think. I mean, I could shout a lot of people from my own communities, for sure. Probably Helix would be a really good choice. Helix is primarily, they're a Super Monkey Ball runner, but have also forwarded into other games. Helix is just one of my best friends in the community and has a great stream community as well as just doing a lot of good for the speedrunning community, bringing visibility for people, the kind of stuff I talked about with the previous question. Helix13_ is their channel if you'd like to go give them a follow. Also got to shout out Demonic Robots, who runs like a whole different suite of games and has been focusing on Control. Also a good buddy of mine, and I wish more people knew about Demonic.
Also, you can go into the archives and find Demonic on the podcast as well.
Oh, I didn't know he was on the podcast.
No, I have had Demonic on as well, so no, definitely. That's awesome. Yeah, Demonic's a good one. So where should people find you? Where if they want to see Jaxler content, where are they looking?
So I'm most active on Twitch. My Twitch channel is just Jaxler1. I tend to stream in the evenings, generally around the time this podcast starts. My Twitter is also JaxlerSR, but I mostly use that for saying, hey, I'm doing the thing tonight of speedrunning. And then I also have stuff on YouTube as well. Just search for Jaxler.
I was going to say, if you're with us live, you can find those links in the chat right now. If you are watching or listening after the fact, all those links to Jaxler's channels should be available in the appropriate description, whether that's on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify. Jaxler, thank you so much for giving me all this time.
Yeah, of course. And thank you for having me. This was a blast.
Now, to conclude the formal part of the podcast, I do need one more thing from you.
Okay.
What I need from you is that I'm going to say a cheesy catchphrase, like let's boost on out of here, and then I need you to give me your best rocket engine noise.
All right.
Okay. Folks, thank you so much for listening. Let's boost on out of here.
Oh, that was good.
That was really good.
I don't know what that was.
That was excellent. That was very. No, I like that. That was good flavor. All right. So if you got questions for Jaxler, you can go ahead and throw some questions in the chat. This is a live Q&A. Also, Hi Cold Zero. I saw. I typically don't respond to chat during the podcast itself. But I'm glad people are finding this through the front page of Speedrunning.com. They've been the folks, the product manager in particular, Spark and Lewis, has been very, very nice about letting this podcast go onto the front page. So I'm always appreciative of that. glad to see you found it through there. Usually I do this once a week, so if you like the podcast format, and there's a whole archive too as well. All right, we got some people here looking to start trouble.
I'll just do one real quick, and then can I take a quick restroom break while we're waiting for questions to come in?
Yeah. Go ahead. Go take care of yourself.
I'll go right now while we wait for questions to come in. Sorry. Enjoy my plushies.
No, we'll do. All right, so I'm going to ask him the question about the name. If he wants to share that, if he wants to share the information about the phone app for diabetes, and certainly he was, very generous in sharing information about how he manages that. I forgot to mute. Well, I mean, I guess I could mute him, and there's no audio coming through, so I'm not too worried about him. Can you hear something from him? I guess when he walked away, you could still hear it. It'll be fine. What could possibly go wrong? Plushies are making noise. They are kind of loud. Are this what is Pokemon plushies? I think it's a Squirtle on the left, right? Something like that. But yeah, all right. We got Jaxler name. Ditto variants of Pokemon. They're all suddenly it's all Ditto. Yeah. Oh, you're talking about the number of viewers, DVK? Well, so right now the stream for when I do this podcast, I have it on the front page of speedrun.com. Helping share people in the speedrunning community out there. We're just waiting for no problem. I'm totally happy to accommodate. So, what is the origin story of the Jaxler name?
So some have already heard this story, I think. But I mentioned Minecraft when my brother and I were in middle school. Mm-hmm. And we being kids, we didn't want to spend our own money on the game because, it was this PC game, and there's kind of that, try to get it free somehow aspect of a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. So what we did is we ended up borrowing the Minecraft handle, one of our friends on the school bus let us borrow his Minecraft account and try the game on it. And so the account name on that was Jaxler. And I've been using the same handle ever since, which is kind of hilarious. And my brother actually saw the guy again, later in high school, and he told the guy that I took the name, and he was like, "Dude, why did you do that? That's not cool." And I'm like, "I know, but I can't think of something better." We asked him where Jaxler actually came from, and according to him, it came from a random generation. So if y'all have ever played World of Warcraft, when you're creating a character and making a name for it, you can actually roll for a randomly generated name, and Jaxler was a part of a name for one of his characters that he rolled. So that's where it actually comes from. So yeah, it was way too long of a story, but
no, that's. I mean, we're on a podcast. That's what this is for. Now Albert was asking, you do not have to share, but he was kind of curious about what goes into the management using the phone to help manage.
I was grabbing my phone, and I'd be happy to share. And
okay.
This goes for anyone. If y'all have any questions about being type 1 or any of the stuff like that, I'm very open with sharing it, because I feel like there's a lot of misinformation about the disease. So if y'all have any more questions as I'm showing some of this stuff, feel free. So for the diabetes stuff has two, for me, and everyone's situation is a bit different. For me, it has two components. I have an insulin pump, which is the thing that gives me the life juice, pretty much, that helps me to regulate my blood sugar. The other thing I have is a sensor called a continuous glucose monitor, or CGM. And so the way that works is it's a little fiber that goes underneath the subcutaneous flesh, and it basically, as the bloodstream passes by it, takes a average blood sugar reading every 5 minutes. And so it works via Bluetooth and actually connects to my phone, and I can actually access it with an app. So I don't know how well you can. I don't know how well you can see it, but that's my blood sugar right now. As of a couple of minutes ago, and it gives you a neat little graph, so you can kind of track it over time, and that can be really helpful with treatment as well. So you can get a better picture of that kind of stuff. And it's nice too, because I think someone mentioned it. A lot of diabetics, the standard way to check your blood sugar is through a blood sample with it sounds really scary, but it's just you prick your finger and get a little bit in a little plastic strip, and then it does the magic for you. But for me, this has been really nice. It's been nice for speedrunning too, because my fingers don't hurt as much. But most people use like the finger stick stuff.
Right. Yeah, no, I can only imagine doing that on a regular basis. I don't know if that's like I donate blood on a pretty regular basis, so I have to do the iron test for that. I don't know.
Oh yeah.
But like I don't know. Is that still more pricking? Like I have no idea. I would obviously but I can only imagine what that's like.
Yeah. Well, the finger pricking you do a couple times a day, but the sensor lasts for 10 days.
Okay.
And honestly, because it's pretty low profile, like you really don't even notice it. It's waterproof, so you can keep it on in the shower.
All right, here. Okay, so we have another question from Core here, which is apparently on behalf of someone else, which is when will you run Super Metroid redesign? Sounds like there's a story here.
So Komaru and Chronom Core as well are both friends of mine from Speedruns Rochester. Komaru specifically is a Super Metroid runner primarily, and runs a Super Metroid ROM hack called Redesign. And there's a saying in that community calling "friends don't let friends run redesign," because it's a pretty brutally long run and it's awful apparently. So that's I guess where that comes from. But no, I'm not going to run Super Metroid. I've actually never played Super Metroid, which I probably should. Yeah, I have the ability to play it. I'm lazy.
All right, so I didn't even realize it, but I totally was like doxing myself this whole podcast because I had the glass right there.
The bee.
For you and for anyone else who's from Speedruns Rochester in the chat, what is your favorite Rochester area eatery? I must know. What is? I
can tell you what Corundum Core's is. It's I can tell you one of Chronom Core's, and it's Piecraft, which is a pizza, like a local pizza joint, just a little bit east of RIT, which is really.
Okay,
I've heard really great things about it. So Piecraft's really good. My favorite place to go is a place called Tully's, which has, it's literally in their name, the best chicken tenders on earth. They were like crack. I don't know how else to describe it.
Do they still have Walk With You near the bookstore? They don't.
Near the bookstore? I don't think so. No.
All right. there used to be an Asian place called Walk With You, and you'd get the receipt, and it would say "A Walk to Remember," but it was WOK. So that's what I always think about. Yeah. No. Again, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a alumni of U of R, and so I just think fondly of McGregor's and Jay's Diner and
Jay's,
stuff like that.
Jay's is another classic.
Yeah. Oh, Walk With You closed probably, or I would be impressed if they closed all the McGregor's. McGregor's probably had it coming though. Not gonna lie.
No, McGregor's
still open. Okay,
it's still open. That little pub, it's still there.
No. There was a few places I had mentioned before the podcast I'd been up that way in late 2019.
Yeah.
Some of those places I didn't go to because wasn't gonna take my spouse to those places. we went to nice places like Old Toad, as you do.
Yeah.
Folks, if you got any more questions, we have a few more minutes. We'll be on the front page of speedrun.com up through 10:30. What is my favorite place? I gotta be honest, I really only remember getting plates from two places, and one of them was Jay's, which is probably the one that I just went to the most often because it was kind of the most convenient to the river campus.
It's right off the road, yeah.
But I also one time went on a date to Nick Tahoe's, and it was truly an authentic experience because I think while we were there, the manager got into a fight with one of the employees. So, like, very authentic Nick Tahoe experience. I will never forget it. If you don't know what a garbage plate, if you are listening to the end of this podcast and you do not know what a garbage plate is, the idea is it's a basically a sort of picnic meal all thrown together on a plate and served. Typically, it is served with the option of one of two meats, either burger or two Red Hots, over top of, I usually remember it as being a choice of you get 3 sides, and there's like a bunch of sides you can choose from, or maybe it was like you would choose 2 of 3. I feel like I usually end up with like potato, like usually I'd get like home fries and baked beans. I think are usually the ones I would get.
Yeah, those are common. I know mac salad is a really common one.
Yeah, mac salad is another common one. Yeah, 100%. So, but like there was definitely like a point in my living in Rochester where I stopped doing that. I would eat them in one sitting, and then like I think like maybe once I finished undergrad, I was like, no, I'm not having this anymore. I'm done.
It's over. Yeah, I haven't even dared attempt because diabetes, and that's a lot of food.
No, it's very reasonable. As I said, we got a few more minutes. Actually, so I asked you the question, or I asked you to shout out some people. And you mentioned Demonic, you mentioned Helix. Now Helix has not been on this podcast. Demonic was. Is there anyone else where you feel like you would, even if they're not necessarily people that you're a part of their community or vice versa, where you'd like, oh, I'd love to see them on Overboost? I'm always kind of curious for word of mouth recommendations.
Definitely Helix. If you can get Helix on the show, Helix is wonderful. Absolute unit. Say that because they're a little short on the short side. Just joking. Let me see. So, honestly, like it would be cool to see Chronom Core on the show. She runs like a lot of really interesting games. And then anyone, I didn't really get the chance to mention Power Up with Pride, which is another community I'm pretty involved with. But there's a lot of awesome people from that community as well. I could link you to their Discord at some point if you're interested. But they put on biannual marathons in the summer and in the winter, and in support of the LGBT community. And it's by queer people for queer people. It's really great. And the people who run it are super duper awesome. And SCBC as well. Who's another one of my Speedruns Rochester friends. Basically, anyone from Speedruns Rochester gets a recommendation from me.
No, that's great. I mean, as you can tell, I love reminiscing and talking about Rochester, so
yeah,
I'm always happy to do that. I'm going to sneak one more question. It might have Anubis asked, do you have a game that you play when you want to unwind?
When I want to unwind, nowadays it's been Minecraft. Honestly, Minecraft. Like,
what are you doing in Minecraft? Because like saying you play Minecraft, and you already talked about this, right? Like you can do so much in Minecraft. Like, what is it that you're doing to unwind then?
So as I've gotten older, I know that sounds so pretentious for a 22-year-old to say, but as I've gotten older, I've stopped playing Minecraft for my own self-interest, and I like playing it as a social game now. But I still love doing the technical stuff, like the redstone and all that jazz. I just like doing it in service of a multiplayer experience. So I love playing modded Minecraft with people. I love playing vanilla Minecraft with people. Speedruns Rochester actually has its own Minecraft server, and we just set up an iron farm on that server, and it's been a lot of fun. So Chronom Core is on that. Cube, who's another one of my friends, they're also a part of that server, and it's been really fun, especially during the pandemic. Minecraft's been so good, keeping us all together. I wouldn't be shocked if I go play this after I hop off the call.
I mean, it's absolutely it's just the right time of night and everything, and I'm glad too. I have a student group from my U of R days that I'm affiliated with, and we have like a sort of Discord server across generations, and seeing the class of 2021, class of 2020 kids and how they've dealt with this, like, because I didn't deal with this crap when I graduated undergrad. I can only imagine. So I'm glad you guys are doing stuff and finding ways to support each other and keep in touch.
Yeah, that's been super great. I guess otherwise on that question, I tried Final Fantasy 14 recently. Don't tell my friend XCOGs that I do, because otherwise bad things will happen to me. But my brother has been getting me to try that game so that we can play together at some point. What else? I've been playing a lot of Pumpkin Jack even off stream. It's just that game's movement is so good. That game has like. I can send you a GIF if you're interested. I think I just sent this in the SRock Discord. But this This game has a technique. There's a lot of movement tech to it, but my favorite by far is this thing called lamp boosting, where you break a destructible lamp while you're standing on it, and it causes you to gain a ton of speed. I'll post it. I'll post the GIF in the chat.
There you go.
It is so.
Yeah. I think I was lurking in your stream last night, and I saw you popping off about this. It's really cool looking.
It's so damn cool. It's a lot of fun. I don't know if you have any more questions for me, but I'll just sneak this in right here at the end. If you heard me talk about any of these games and you're interested in trying them yourself, feel free to reach out to me directly if you want to like get the deets on like the Discords for any of this game. Pretty much every game I run except for Spidey has its own Discord group. And Discords are a really great way to get in contact with a lot of these communities, because not everyone's on Twitter, not even everyone's on Twitch, especially the smaller scale you go. So feel free to feel free to just DM me on Twitch or on Twitter. Just let me know. I'm very open when it comes to that. So don't feel like, this guy on this podcast, it doesn't seem super professional. No, please come find me.
I think it's always true with with small games is that you feel free to reach out to these people, because chances are they're so excited to talk to someone about it. Like, let me tell you. There's no problem. Yeah, 100%.
And that's what's so fun about these obscure games is it becomes a chain reaction, because people who run obscure games, it's almost always they run multiple. So there's a couple of exceptions. Like Monster only really runs Neopets, but like for example, like I ran into Shasta from running some games. Like we just crossed paths, and he was I bounced off of him into Shadow Dimensions. People who play obscure games know where I apologize for swearing. They know where the good shit is, and that's one of the best parts about running weird stuff is you get to learn about all these cool games that you would have never otherwise.
All right, Albert waited until we were off the front page, I guess, to ask, have you heard of Rough Trigger?
Of Rough Trigger?
Yeah. That sounds like a no.
I haven't, but by the description of Ratchet and Clank knockoff. I'm gonna put that on my list of things to Google.
There you go.
Generally, whenever like a game gets suggested to me, or like someone brings up a game, I have like a text document. Like I was looking at Otogi for a while, which actually got run at AGDQ by MA.
Right.
That was a game I had on my list, but that game is weird. You actually have to have an OG Xbox to play it. It's not compatible with.
Oh, there's no backwards compat either?
Yeah, it's one of the only games that isn't backwards. So
it's
I'm
like
going to write
all
that
the
down.
mech games. And Mech Assault, none of the Mech Assault games are backwards compat, or Phantom Crash, or like any of the mech games.
Or literally anything on PS2.
Oh, yeah, all that too, yeah.
I mean, there's the backwards compatible PS3, but if you manage to find one that hasn't exploded yet,
right,
you might find yourself with a hole in the wall.
Yeah,
a little bit later.
Good luck. All right, so we're about wrapped up here. Do you have a raid target that I could go throw whatever audience I have to?
Let me see if I can find someone small that... Let's see here. I have a SpongeBob runner I can... Well, let me see if they're still going to be streaming. They're probably wrapping up. Okay, let me try again. I believe... Oh, perfect. Let me type it in your DMs.
Okay.
Frozen. So Frozen is a really nice gal. She is primarily a Celeste speedrunner, and she has a great community. So...
Yeah, I think Frozen... Yeah, actually, I think Frozen was a commentator for... I want to say an Emre Pokemon run that I watched 2 weeks ago. Someone said Frozen to me recently, so this works out.
You should also get her on your podcast too. She's great. Yeah. She's really involved with the Celeste scene, and it's just really great TM. And if I can suggest a raid message, just E. No, actually Frick. Frick. I'm going to type it in chat.
Like
all uppercase. Okay. That's a FFC she has in her chat. That's like a little Bulbasaur.
All right. Well, in that case, I'm going to go ahead and let you go end the call so I can send the raid over. Right. Thank you again so much, and hopefully I'll see you around in the future.
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.